The stranger is one of the most mysterious, misunderstood, and yet strangely magnetic figures throughout human history, from myths to modern literature, from ancient philosophers to modern psychologists. The image of the outsider, the alien, the one who does not belong, has fascinated us for millennia. Why? Because the stranger reflects something we all feel, at least once in our lives: the experience of not fitting in, of looking at the world and feeling like we are not truly part of it, that something about us, or something about them, creates distance, and yet, that very distance often becomes a powerful lens for truth. The stranger is not just a wanderer, not just a foreigner, not just someone from a distant land or an unfamiliar face. The stranger is a mirror, a challenge, a force of disruption that asks, what if the rules we live by aren't as solid as we think? We fear the stranger, but we also need them. Many of us suffer from the absence of the stranger in our lives. In a world obsessed with belonging, fitting in, and appearing normal, we forget the value of standing apart, of seeing from the outside. We conform to culture, repeat groupthink, and become echoes in a hall of mirrors, reflecting back what we think others want to see. But in doing so, we lose the ability to see clearly. As French philosopher Albert Camus writes in his classic novel The Stranger, in our society, any man who doesn't cry at his mother's funeral is vulnerable to be condemned to death. That's not a metaphor. It's the opening premise of the book. The protagonist, Musso, commits a crime, but he is not truly punished for the crime. He's punished for not reacting the way society expects him to react. He's punished for being a stranger. We fear what we don't understand, and nothing is more frightening than someone who does not play the game. The stranger reveals the fragility of our social expectations, the unwritten rules we live by but rarely question. Strangers, by definition, are not part of the group. They don't have our codes, our values, our shared past, and that makes them threatening. But it also makes them invaluable, because only someone from the outside can ask, why do you do things this way? And that is where the real power lies. The power of the stranger is not just in what they challenge, but in what they reveal. They strip away the assumed and expose the constructed. They force us to face ourselves, not the story we tell, but the truth beneath the mask. Philosophy has always had a soft spot for strangers. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, was himself seen as a stranger in his own city. He questioned too much, resisted too much, disturbed the peace too much, and so Athens killed him. Jesus, too, was a stranger to his own people, not in blood, but in spirit. A prophet is not without honor, he said, except in his own town. Every great teacher, mystic, or revolutionary has carried the scent of the outsider. Why? Because change never comes from within the system. It takes someone who stands outside it, someone who doesn't quite belong, to hold up a mirror and say, this is what you have become. In mythology, the stranger appears often as the traveler, the visitor, the unknown guest. Sometimes they bring danger, other times they bring salvation, but they always bring change. The ancient Greeks practiced a sacred code called xenia, hospitality to the stranger, because they believed the gods sometimes came in disguise. To turn away the outsider was to risk offending the divine. And yet today, how many strangers do we turn away with our eyes, our laws, our assumptions? How many strangers do we silence, ignore, or judge, simply because they do not reflect our world back to us? The real question is not, who is the stranger? The real question is, are we willing to see ourselves through their eyes, to accept the stranger is to accept another way of seeing, and that is never comfortable, but it is often necessary. In psychology, Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, and fear, the parts we exile. But sometimes, the shadow does not live only within us. Sometimes, it walks around, in the form of someone else, someone who unsettles us, disrupts our routine, or speaks a truth we're not ready to hear. The stranger is our living shadow. They carry the energy of transformation, not because they seek to destroy, but because they refuse to pretend. This is why the stranger is so often depicted as a wanderer, a hermit, a rebel. They carry wisdom not because they know more, but because they've seen the world without the veil of belonging. When you don't belong, you see things others don't. You see the cracks in the system. You notice what doesn't make sense. You hear what others try not to say. In Kafka's world, the stranger is not just a person. It's a condition, a way of being, a sense of absurdity, a world that makes rules without reason. To live as a stranger is to live in a question. And that may be the most philosophical position of all. There is a deep loneliness in being a stranger. But there is also clarity. There is power. There is vision. There is freedom. Because when you no longer need to belong, you are no longer bound by the rules that belonging requires. You can speak without fear. You can live without approval. You can walk your own path, even when it's invisible to everyone else. In religion, the figure of the stranger often becomes the holy one, the desert hermit, the wandering monk, the prophet in rags. The Bible says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels unaware." Perhaps the stranger is not someone else at all. Perhaps the stranger is a part of you, a voice you've buried, a truth you've ignored, a path you've feared. To walk. To meet the stranger outside is to meet the stranger within. And in that encounter, something begins to shift. We remember who we were before the world told us who to be. We remember how to see, not with judgment, but with wonder. Not with fear, but with honesty. Not with answers, but with questions. The stranger reminds us that the world is far bigger than we pretend it is. That truth does not belong to the majority. That sanity, sometimes, is just consensus. And that what is right is not always what is popular. To be a stranger is not a curse. It is a calling, a gift, a sacred fire. Because the stranger, whether in story, in society, or in the soul, is not here to comfort us. They are here to wake us up. So if you feel like a stranger in this world, good, you are exactly where the world needs you to be. Because sometimes the outsider sees what the insiders cannot. And in the eyes of the stranger, we might just catch a glimpse of who we really are.